Welcome to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring the random prompts of Daniel Rosehill as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters. Join us for deep dives into AI, technology, and whatever other random thing Daniel finds fascinating today. Subscribe on Spotify or your favorite podcatcher. Now, today's episode.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
Hey, Herman and Corin. This afternoon, sometimes I'm not the best at answering my phone. I'm being as responsive on that channel as other people would like me to. Or maybe I'm just a millennial who hates phone calls. I actually don't mind them, but I sometimes don't hear them or it gets missed when I'm at my computer especially. But for once, I picked up within a few seconds. And then I realized I was speaking to a bot. It was a SMS spam thing asking me very frantically, do I need an urgent approval loan? And I said, well, that's what you get when you pick up the phone. So back I go to my little booth where if you something really important, send me an email or at least leave me a voice message that I can transcribe. But it got me thinking about spam, and I mentioned that phone spam is actually quite a problem in Israel. SMS spam, and especially spam that is trying to sell desperate people horrible financial products like emergency loans and high interest rate loans, loan sharking. And it's one of those many things about Israel that I think to myself, how can we have a society capable of developing atmospheric missile interceptions, and yet in so many respects it's so oddly primitive? I think the same thing every time the power goes down just because it's raining for a few hours. In certain respects, Israel is just a perplexing place. But Herman and Corin, it made me think about another prompt I want to ask, which is the continued existence of SMS. It seems like it shouldn't really be still around, but yet it is. In Israel, it has a unique role to play, I guess, because of the large ultra-Orthodox community who don't use smartphones. So for emergency alerting, the authorities actually made a big push to the red alert system is very good, and we've talked about it before, but it's a problem if you don't have a smartphone. You're not going to get the alert through the app because you don't have a phone with internet. So they began using this electronic warning system that works over SMS, so that literally everyone, whether your phone is dumb or smart, gets the red alert thing. So well done, Israel. That's to their credit. But for other people, why are you still using SMS? Here's where it particularly annoys me when I'm traveling to the US, and maybe with eSIMs this will finally be a thing of the past, but it's always tricky when I'm roaming to get my two SIMs to work. Even in fact here, getting SMS on a dual SIM phone, for some reason it just doesn't work that well, and it becomes a problem when two-factor authentication, the only method offered, is SMS, which is a surprising amount of the time. I changed my phone number this summer. I changed provider, and I guess at the end of the conversation they said something like, so you're okay if you get a new line? I'm like, yeah, sure, no problem. Oh my gosh, the amount of problems that changing a phone number causes is prodigious, and it became massive is maybe a bit too strong of a word, but a significant issue with some websites like the Post, who are unreachable at the best of times, and they have this functionality for changing your phone number. But to do that, you need to get a one-time password to your old phone. So if you change phone number and you don't have the old phone number anymore, you can't change your thing. There's no way. There's just no way out of it. So my question, Herman and Corin, I feel like SMS has no role to play in two-factor authentication. Both from that standpoint, if you're really dependent on a service like PayPal or your bank account, being reliant upon getting an SMS sounds very, very flaky to me. And the second thing is, from a security standpoint, SMS, correct me if I'm wrong, is not encrypted. So if we're talking about, it's hard to think of a worse medium for the purpose of OTP or two-factor authentication. And yet, it seems to be a very hard habit to kick. Herman and Corin, let's talk about SMS. Why is it still used? Who's still using it? And why do we see so many firms that are otherwise have good cybersecurity insisting on only providing two-factor authentication through an SMS message?
So, Herman, I was looking through my messages the other day, trying to find a specific confirmation code for a login. You know the drill, and I realize my inbox is basically a graveyard of 6-digit numbers. It is just page after page of these expiring codes from banks, social media, even my grocery delivery app. It felt like looking at a digital landfill.
Herman Popplebear here, and I know exactly what you mean. It is like a digital fossil record of every time we have tried to prove we are who we say we are. It is actually a bit overwhelming when you look at it all at once. You see the timestamps and realize just how much of our lives is mediated by these tiny, ephemeral strings of digits.
It really is. And it got me thinking about today's prompt from Daniel, which is about why on earth we are still using short message service, or SMS, for two-factor authentication. Daniel points out that even firms with otherwise stellar cybersecurity, we are talking top-tier tech giants and global financial institutions, still rely on it, despite the reliability issues when you are traveling or changing numbers, and the glaring lack of encryption.
It is a fascinating paradox, right? We are in February of 2026. We have sophisticated facial recognition that maps thousands of invisible dots on your face. We have hardware security keys that are practically unhackable, and we have passkeys becoming the industry standard. And yet, the backbone of digital security for millions of people is a protocol developed in the 1980s. It is like using a Victorian-era padlock to secure a high-tech server room.
Exactly. And Daniel also mentioned the unique role it plays here in Israel, specifically for emergency alerts to the ultra-Orthodox community who might not use smartphones. So, I want to dig into that cultural nuance later, but first, let's talk about the standard itself. Why is SMS so persistent? If it is objectively less secure than an authenticator app or a physical key, why hasn't it been phased out? Why are we still getting these texts in 2026?
Well, the short answer is the lowest common denominator problem. If you are a massive company, say a global bank or a service like Google or Meta, you need a security method that works for everyone. And when I say everyone, I mean the person with the latest titanium smartphone in San Francisco and the person with a 10-year-old feature phone in a rural village in a developing nation. SMS is the only thing that is truly universal. It doesn't require data, it doesn't require an app store, and it doesn't require a high-speed internet connection. It just needs a cellular signal.
But isn't that a bit of a security through convenience trap? I mean, just because everyone has it doesn't mean it is the right tool for the job. We don't use screen doors for bank vaults just because screen doors are easy to open.
Oh, absolutely. It is a massive compromise, but from a business perspective, friction is the ultimate enemy. If a bank tells a customer they have to download a specific app, manage a recovery phrase, or buy a $50 hardware key just to check their balance, a huge percentage of those customers are going to get frustrated and give up. SMS requires zero setup from the user. You already have a phone number, you already know how to read a text. For a product manager, that zero friction is a siren song that is very hard to resist, even if the security engineers are screaming in the background.
I get the friction argument, but let's talk about the actual security risks. Daniel mentioned the lack of encryption. When I get a code via text, that message is traveling through the cellular network in plain text, right? It is not like my iMessages or my WhatsApp chats.
Correct. It is not end-to-end encrypted. It is more like a postcard than a sealed letter. It passes through the systems of your mobile carrier and potentially other carriers if the message is being routed internationally. Each of those points is a potential intercept. And that leads us to the big boogeyman of SMS security, signaling system number 7, or SS7.
I have heard that name come up in security circles. That is the protocol that handles how different phone networks talk to each other, right? It is like the behind-the-scenes switchboard of the global phone system.
Exactly. And here is the kicker. SS7 was designed in the 1970s, long before anyone was worried about hackers intercepting text messages or state-sponsored actors spoofing identities. It was built on a foundation of trust between a few large national carriers. It is full of vulnerabilities that allow attackers to essentially trick the network. If a sophisticated attacker gets access to the SS7 network, which they can do by bribing a small carrier or finding a vulnerable entry point, they can essentially redirect calls and messages intended for your number to their own device. They don't even need your physical phone. They just tell the network, hey, Korn's number is actually over here now, and the network believes them.
That is terrifying. It makes the whole something you have, part of two-factor authentication, feel like a lie. I don't have my number, the network just thinks I do. And then there is the more common one we hear about, which is SIM swapping. That feels more like a human problem than a technical one.
Yes, and SIM swapping is actually more of a social engineering problem. An attacker calls your phone company, pretends to be you, maybe they found your mother's maiden name and your birth date on a leaked database, and they convince a customer service representative to port your number over to a new SIM card that the attacker controls. Once they have your number, they can trigger forgot password requests for your email, your bank, your everything. All those two-factor codes go straight to the attacker's phone. We saw a massive wave of this in 2024 and 2025, where even high-profile tech executives were getting their accounts drained.
It feels like such a huge vulnerability for something as critical as banking. I mean, we have seen cases where people have lost their entire life savings because of a SIM swap. So, if firms know this, why are they still pushing SMS? Is it just about the support calls?
A huge part of it is legacy infrastructure. Updating a massive banking core that was written in COBOL 40 years ago to support something like WebAuthn or passkeys is a monumental, multi-million-dollar task. But also, think about the support costs. If a user loses their phone and they were using an authenticator app without a cloud backup, they are locked out. That leads to a very expensive 30-minute phone call to customer support where a human has to verify their identity. If they are using SMS, they just go to the store, get a new phone, put in their SIM, and they are back in business. Companies often choose the path of least resistance for their support teams, even if it means a slightly higher risk for the user. They have calculated that the cost of occasional fraud is lower than the cost of a massive increase in support tickets.
That is a cynical but probably accurate take. But what about Daniel's point about reliability? I have definitely been in situations where I am traveling, I have a local SIM card in, and I can't log into a service because it wants to send a code to my home number which isn't active. It is incredibly frustrating to be locked out of your own money because you crossed a border.
It is a major pain point, and it is even worse if you are in an area with poor cellular reception but great Wi-Fi. An authenticator app works offline or over Wi-Fi because it is just a mathematical algorithm running on your phone. But SMS needs that cellular handshake. In 2026, with the world being as mobile as it is, you would think we would have moved past this. But the universal nature of SMS keeps it on life support.
You would think so. Now, let's pivot to the Israel-specific context Daniel mentioned. He talked about how SMS serves a unique role for the ultra-Orthodox community here. For those who aren't familiar, can you explain what a kosher phone is? Because it is a very specific piece of technology.
Sure. Within certain ultra-Orthodox or Haredi communities, there is a strong desire to limit exposure to the internet and unfiltered content for religious and cultural reasons. So, they use what are called kosher phones. These are usually basic feature phones. Think old-school Nokia bricks where the internet browser, the camera, and even standard messaging apps are disabled at the hardware or firmware level. They are strictly for voice calls and, in many cases, very basic SMS. They are even marked with a specific seal of approval from a rabbinical committee.
Right. So for this community, a smartphone app for two-factor authentication or a modern emergency alert app is physically impossible to use. They don't have an app store. They don't even have a data plan.
Exactly. And this became a huge issue for public safety. Israel has a very sophisticated emergency alert system called Red Alert, or Ziva Atom. Most people have an app on their smartphone that blares an alarm the second a rocket is detected headed for their area. But if you are using a kosher phone, you don't have apps. During the conflicts we have seen over the last few years, this created a dangerous information gap.
So the solution was to use the cellular broadcast system and SMS.
Yes, the Homefront command worked to ensure that these emergency alerts could be pushed through as high-priority SMS messages or even automated voice calls to these devices. They also use Cell Broadcast, which is a different protocol that sends a message to every phone connected to a specific tower, regardless of the number. In that specific context, SMS isn't just a convenience, It is a life-saving bridge to a community that has intentionally opted out of the smartphone ecosystem. It is the only way to reach tens of thousands of people in seconds.
That is a really important nuance. It shows that while SMS might be primitive from a security standpoint, its simplicity is also its strength in terms of accessibility. It is a technology that doesn't care how smart your phone is. It is the universal translator of the digital age.
Precisely. But that brings us back to the question, can we have both? Can we have the accessibility of SMS for those who need it, while moving the rest of the world toward more secure standards? Because right now, it feels like the legacy option is holding everyone back.
Well, that is where things like passkeys come in, right? We have talked about this before, but it feels like in 2026 we are finally seeing a real push to replace passwords and two-factor authentication with something more integrated.
We are. Passkeys are based on the FIDO2 standards, and they essentially turn your device itself into the security key. Instead of a code being sent to you, your phone or computer uses a cryptographic key pair to prove your identity. It is much more secure because the secret never leaves your device, and it is inherently resistant to phishing. An attacker can't trick you into typing a passkey into a fake website because the browser itself handles the handshake and will only talk to the legitimate domain.
But even with passkeys, don't you often need a fallback? And isn't that fallback usually SMS?
You hit the nail on the head. That is the trap Daniel is talking about. Even if you use the most secure method available, if the service allows you to reset your access via an SMS code, then your security is only as strong as that SMS link. It is the weakest link in the chain. It is like having a high security biometric lock on your front door, but leaving a spare key under a plastic rock in the garden.
So why don't companies let us disable SMS recovery entirely? I know some services like Google or certain high-security crypto exchanges allow it, but for my local bank, it is not even an option. I have to have a phone number on file.
It goes back to that fear of the locked out user. Companies are terrified of a customer losing their physical security key or their phone and having no way to get back into their account. They see SMS as the ultimate safety net because most people will eventually get their phone number back from the carrier, even if they lose their device. From a liability standpoint, they would rather you get hacked because of a SIM swap, which they can blame on the carrier, than have you lose access to your money because you lost a YubiKey, which they would have to explain to you.
It is a trade-off between absolute security and absolute recoverability. And most firms are choosing recoverability because it is better for their bottom line and their support metrics.
Exactly. But I think we are starting to see a shift. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, in the United States actually recommended against using SMS for two-factor authentication as far back as 2016. They didn't outright ban it, but they labeled it deprecated, which is a fancy way of saying use this only if you have no other choice. And in 2024, we saw new regulations in the European Union that started putting more pressure on banks to move towards strong customer authentication that isn't easily intercepted.
10 years ago, NIST said it was a bad idea, and yet here we are in 2026. It is amazing how slowly these standards move. I mean, think about the billions of dollars spent on cybersecurity every year, and yet this massive hole remains open for the sake of convenience.
It is also worth mentioning that the cost of SMS isn't zero for these companies. Sending billions of international text messages is actually quite expensive. There is a whole industry of SMS aggregators that charge companies for every code sent. Some companies are actually moving away from SMS not because of security, but because they are tired of the bill.
That is hilarious. So it won't be the hackers that kill SMS, it will be the accountants.
Honestly, that is often how it happens in tech. But there is another factor, international SMS OTP fraud, or artificially inflated traffic. This is a fascinatingly devious scam where fraudsters partner with corrupt or complicit mobile network operators in certain countries. They then use bots to trigger thousands of two-factor authentication requests from a company's website to phone numbers in those countries. The company pays the aggregator pays the network operator, and the fraudster gets a kickback from the operator.
Wait, so the companies are paying for the privilege of being spammed with fake authentication requests?
Exactly. Elon Musk actually talked about this when he took over Twitter, now X. He claimed the company was losing $60 million a year to fraudulent SMS messages. Whether that 60 million number is exact or not, the problem is very real. It is one of the reasons many platforms started charging for SMS two-factor authentication or pushing people toward authenticator apps. They realized they were being bled dry by bots.
That is a huge incentive to move away from it. If it is insecure, unreliable, and expensive, the writing should be on the wall. But let's talk about what the alternative looks like for the average person. If I want to be as secure as possible today, in 2026, what should I be doing?
The gold standard is still a hardware security key, like a YubiKey. It is a physical device you plug into your computer or tap against your phone via NFC. It is virtually impossible to phish because the key only works on the legitimate website it was registered for. An attacker can't trick you into typing in your YubiKey. It is a hardware-level handshake.
But most people aren't going to carry a physical key on their keychain. It feels a bit secret agent for the average person.
Right, so the next best thing is a dedicated authenticator app. Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator, or my personal favorite, something like 2FAS or Rivo, which are open source and allow for encrypted backups. These apps generate time-based one-time passwords, or TOTP.
And those don't rely on the cellular network, so they work when you are traveling or in a basement with no signal.
Exactly. And since the seed for the code is stored on your device, it can be intercepted via SS7 or redirected via ASIM swap. It is significantly more secure.
So, if I have a choice between SMS and an authenticator app, I should always pick the app. But here is the catch. Many services don't give you the choice to only use the app. They force you to have a phone number on file as a backup.
And that is the problem. If the phone number is there, it is a backdoor. My advice to people who are really concerned is to use a VoIP number like Google Voice for their two-factor authentication if the service allows it. Those numbers aren't tied to a physical SIM card, so they are immune to traditional SIM swapping. You can protect your Google account with a hardware key, which then protects your Google Voice number, creating a much more secure chain.
That is a clever workaround. But it is still a workaround. It shouldn't be this hard to be secure.
It shouldn't. But we are in this awkward transition period. We are moving from the something you know, which is a password, to something you have, which is your phone or a key. SMS was the first attempt at something you have, but it turns out the thing you have is actually a virtual number controlled by a third-party carrier, not the device in your pocket.
That is a great way to put it. You don't really have your phone number in the way you think you do. You are just renting it from a carrier who can be tricked into giving it to someone else.
Precisely. And in Israel, that rental is even more complex because of the regulations around kosher phones and the way the numbers are allocated. There is a whole specific numbering range for kosher lines. If you try to port a kosher number to a non-kosher device, it often won't work because the system recognizes the prefix, which actually adds a weird layer of unintentional security to those lines.
I never thought about that. The restriction itself becomes a security feature. But for the rest of us, the lack of encryption is still a major issue. If I am on a public Wi-Fi, or even just using a cellular tower that has been compromised by a Stingray device, wait, are Stingrays still a thing in 2026?
Oh, absolutely. International Mobile Subscriber Identity Catchers, or Stingrays, have only gotten smaller and more sophisticated. They pretend to be a legitimate cell tower, and your phone connects to them because they broadcast a stronger signal. Once you are connected, they can intercept any unencrypted traffic, which includes your SMS two-factor codes. It is a classic man-in-the-middle attack.
It feels like the more we talk about this, the more insane it seems that we still use this system. It is like leaving the key to your high-security vault under the doormat and just hoping no one looks there.
It really is. But again, look at it from the perspective of a company like a major airline. They have millions of customers, many of whom are infrequent travelers who might only log in once a year. If they force a complex security standard, their help desk will be overwhelmed every holiday season. They would rather deal with the occasional fraud case than a million "I can't log in" calls. It is a cold, hard calculation of risk versus cost.
So, what is the aha moment here? Is there a version of the future where SMS for security finally dies?
I think the aha moment is realizing that SMS was never meant to be a security tool. It was a messaging tool that we hijacked for security because it was convenient. The death of SMS two-factor authentication will happen when passkeys become the default on every new smartphone and computer. When your login is just your thumbprint or your face, and the cryptography happens in the background, the need for a 6-digit code sent via a 1970s protocol just evaporates.
I can't wait for that day. No more scrolling through a graveyard of expiring codes. No more worrying if my SIM card is being swapped while I sleep.
We are getting there. Apple, Google, and Microsoft are all pushing passkeys very hard now. The challenge is the long tail of older websites and services that will take a decade to catch up. We will be talking about this in 2030, I'm sure.
And what about the kosher phone users? Will they be left behind in a passkey-only world?
That is a great question. There will likely always be a need for a voice-based or legacy fallback for those communities. Perhaps a dedicated hardware token that doesn't require internet? Some banks already offer those little fob devices that generate a code. They are basically an offline version of an authenticator app.
Right, the little RSA tokens. I remember my dad having one of those for work years ago. It felt so high-tech at the time.
Exactly. Everything old is new again. Those tokens are actually much more secure than SMS because they aren't connected to a network. They are air-gapped. If we could get those into the hands of people who don't use smartphones, that would be a huge step up from SMS.
It is interesting how the solution might actually be going back to older, more specialized hardware rather than relying on a one-size-fits-all messaging system.
Definitely. Specificity is often the friend of security. The more general purpose a tool is, like SMS, the more attack vectors it has.
That makes a lot of sense. So let's wrap this up with some practical takeaways for our listeners, because even though the system is flawed, we still have to live in it for now.
Right? Number one, if a service offers an authenticator app option, take it immediately. Go into your settings, enable the app, and if it lets you, disable SMS as a backup.
Number 2. If you are worried about SIM swapping, call your mobile carrier and ask them to put a port freeze or a secondary password on your account. It is not perfect, but it adds another layer of friction for an attacker.
Number 3, for your most critical accounts, like your primary email and your bank, consider buying a hardware security key. They are relatively cheap now. You can get one for $25 or $30, and the peace of mind is worth it.
And number 4, be aware of the recovery trap. Check your forgot password settings. If your ultra-secure account can be reset by a single text message to your phone, you are still vulnerable. You need to secure the recovery path as much as the login path.
And finally, for our listeners in Israel or those traveling here, understand the context. SMS is still a vital lifeline for emergency services and certain communities. It is a reminder that technology doesn't exist in a vacuum. It has to serve the needs of the people where they are, even if that means using a less than perfect standard.
That is a great point. It is easy to criticize the tech from a purely theoretical standpoint, but the reality on the ground is always more complicated.
Exactly. It is about balancing the ideal with the functional.
Well, Herman, I think we have thoroughly deconstructed the weirdness of SMS today. It is a relic, a vulnerability, a lifesaver, and a multi-million-dollar fraud engine all at once.
It is the ultimate digital duct tape. It is holding everything together even though we know we should probably be using real bolts.
Beautifully put. And hey, if you have been enjoying our deep dives into these weird prompts, we would really appreciate it if you could leave us a review on your podcast app. Whether it is Spotify or Apple Podcasts, those ratings really help more people find the show.
Yeah, it genuinely makes a difference for us. We love seeing the feedback and it helps us keep this collaboration going. We read every single one.
This has been My Weird Prompts. You can find all our past episodes, including our deep dives into other security topics, at myweirdprompts.com. We have an RSS feed there for subscribers and a contact form if you want to reach out.
And if you have a prompt of your own or just want to say hi, you can email us at show@myweirdprompts.com. We are available on all the major platforms, so make sure to subscribe wherever you listen.
Thanks for joining us in Jerusalem today. We will be back soon with another prompt from Daniel.
Until next time, stay secure and stay curious.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring Daniel Rosehill's AI prompts, as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters including me, Cornelius the Sloth. Subscribe on Spotify or visit myweirdprompts.com.